This is Chapter 9, Problem Solving and Decision Making in Groups Through Theoretical Perspective, and this is Kayla speaking, and I'll be going over the first few concepts of the chapter. The chapter discusses how problem solving and decision making involves creating and discovering solutions, evaluating those solutions, and then choosing the best solution to put into effect. Typically, groups and individuals have a desired goal that they are trying to meet. And decision making also includes answering questions to further the problem solving process. There are some terms listed at the bottom, and there are also page numbers to reference the book at the bottom of the slide as well. So when discussing groups versus individuals, groups tend to be better at problem solving, but only when group members work interdependently. So some advantages to working in groups to solve problems are that members compensate for each other's weaknesses and can spot each other's errors. Groups can process more information than individuals can typically. Each person offers a different perspective to the group, and groups save more time because they're able to come up with solutions quicker. Disadvantages can be typically it takes more time to make the decisions within the group because everyone must be accounted for in that process. There's also a pressure to conform in groups, whether it be with bylaws or laws of an organization or just social norms within a group. And then the book points out that at their best, groups will achieve an effect which is the assembly effect. And again, that definition is listed at the bottom of the slide. Factors that affect the quality of the group's outputs include the types of tasks, the abilities of each member, and the type of communication used by the group. The types of tasks are listed below. Normally, a group works better with conjunctive tasks, which is each member possesses information relevant to the problem solving, but no member has all the information. So this just means that each person is contributing something different to the group's outputs. Group potential strongly influences group performance. Bona fide factors include full participation and group climate. Bona fide group climate just means that there are negative and positive behaviors that are shown. So negative behaviors would be sarcasm and saying hurtful things to other group members that may negatively affect decision making, while positive behaviors may be supporting and respecting each other's decisions that would improve decision making. So now I'm going to go over the functional perspective of group problem solving and decision making. Procedures improve a group's problem solving and decision making because members must pay attention to the functions of a group in order to make the problem solving successful, but no procedure is superior to another. Group members are motivated to make the best choice possible through this decision making and problem solving. And then the communication function needed for a group to succeed is obviously the functional perspective, which is created by the two men listed in the slides. And that basically says that group members must understand the issue, members must determine what minimal characteristics are acceptable, determine relevant and realistic alternatives, examine alternatives against previously determined characteristics, and select an alternative in which most characteristics are needed. The book also states and addresses that these tasks are sometimes more in a less organized sequence than what is listed, but each step is important, and if a group fails to recognize one of these steps, they're probably not going to have as successful problem solving and decision making as they could.
Needed. Next is understanding the charge and area of freedom. I'll begin by defining both charge and area of freedom, as it is important that everyone understands both of these terms. Charge is an assignment that is given to a group, and the area of freedom is the amount of authority that the group has along with limitations. Some of the questions are, what's the group supposed to do? What's the time frame? What resources does the group have? What should the group not do? What is the final project and who receives it? Next up is understanding the type of questions to be addressed. There are 4 types of questions that groups address. The 4 terms are question of fact, question of conjuncture, question of value, and question of policy. Question of fact asks whether something is true or if it actually happened. It is easiest to decide questions of fact because the answers can be verified. Question of conjuncture asks group to speculate / make educated guesses about what might happen. Question of value asks the group what is right, good, preferable, and acceptable. Question of policy asks what course of action will a group take. All right, after the 4 types of question is discussing criteria for evaluating solutions. The definition of criteria is standards against which to evaluate the various options. And some more information about criteria. Criteria establishes group standards and values. Some criteria must be met and are absolute, but with relative criteria, the group has some leeway. Participants wanted criteria discussed after brainstorming. If criteria has high evaluation clarity, they may not need to be discussed. Finally, the last subject is understanding how the group's decision will be made. If the group decisions are strictly for the leader to make, there are both advantages and disadvantages. Some of the advantages are they're high quality if they're expert, they're fast, and they avoid group decision anxiety. Some of the disadvantages are there's a lack of input from the rest of the group. Members of the group may not support a certain decision, and it may cause resentment, reduced cohesiveness, and lack of motivation. If the leader has consultation, there are both advantages and disadvantages as well. Some of the advantages are the final product can be high quality, it can be faster than having a group decide, it can be useful if a group can't decide, and members appreciate the opportunity to participate and have their voices heard. Some of the disadvantages are members may resent the decision if their input isn't used. The minority in the group of the decision may not support the decision that was made by the majority, which could cause conflict and other things. And it may encourage members to duck hard work of consensus since they don't feel as involved.
Hey y'all, this is Luke. Today I'll be talking about understanding how the group's decision will be made. There are many different types of methods of decision making. Earlier, we heard from Bennett about the advantages and disadvantages of the leader and by the leader with consultation. In this slide, I will discuss the advantages and disadvantages of a majority vote and by consensus. The choice of a majority vote is great because there are immediate results and there is equality for all. Unfortunately, the majority vote is not so kind to the minority. So when choosing majority vote, there's a quick action with equal opportunity for all, yet the bias and groupthink of the majority brings unhappy members of the deciding vote and who didn't do it as well. When it comes to a consensus, there is unanimity that allows high quality decisions as well as a full support. Unfortunately, this method takes more time, and there's again a bias that allows for members to feel pressured into groupthink. People are bound to go through life with problems. When solving the problems of the world, people usually go through phases, and so this is where we understand the phasic progression. These phases are understood as the phasic progression, as stated before. The phasic route that we will look through is constructed through the Fisher's model of group phases. And phasic progression is the movement of a group through the fairly predictable phases or stages, each of which is characterized by specific kinds of statements. As stated in the slide, the phases are the orientation phase, conflict, decision, emergence, and reinforcement. The orientation phase is the phase where people in a group meet and are getting acquainted to one another. The orientation phase usually doesn't have much disagreement, although the conflict stage is where the disagreement and opinions are thrown on blast. During the conflict stage, group members are open and bold in what they say. Most of the wishy-washy behavior of the conflict is gone. But then the decision emergence is where there's a reappearance of the ambiguity. The decision of the group is made at that point, and strong beliefs of others are generally let go. The decision that is forming allows for unity for a common goal. and the reinforcement of the group is when the members form their decision and build the group up. The group usually provides positive encouragement to the rest of the group. So the model picture here kind of looks like a swirl of confusion, but it resembles the model of group phases. The process of group phases continually repeats, and as more problems arise, the more the spiral moves forward. But what is unique about this is the time axis on the bottom. As time moves forward and more decisions are made, the maturity of the group rises. Before Katie kind of takes over, I'm going to finish talking with promoting critical thinking. And critical thinking is something that is seldom used in undergraduate groups. Although undergrad students are not quick to promote critical thinking, it is something that is encouraged. Critical thinking is the systematic examination of information and ideas on the basis of evidence and logical reasoning.
Hi, this is Katie. So for evaluating information, the book describes information as the raw material from which a group's decision is made, so like facts, ideas, opinions, and data. And then it breaks it down into sections, so distinguishing between facts and inferences. A fact can be verified as true or false, and an inference is an opinion that goes beyond what was actually observed, and it makes a leap from a fact to a conclusion based on fact. Evaluating survey and statistical data. These are questions to ask when doing so who commissioned the study, how was the data gathered and analyzed, and how are the questions phrased. And then evaluating the sources and implications of opinions. The person must determine priorities of values, ethics, goals, and procedures acceptable to all. And then members must make inferences about what will probably happen if they adopt each possible alternative. And then they should consider source and implication of the opinion. So the next section was evaluating reason, and it talks about fallacies, which is a flaw or a reasoning error, and then it breaks it down into 5 sections. So it talks about overgeneralizing, and that's when a conclusion is not supported by enough data. And then ad hominem attack is a statement that attacks a person rather than attacking their argument. The third one is suggesting inappropriate casual relationships. Sometimes because 2 events are related or occurred together, we associate them together. But events usually have multiple complex causes. False dilemmas. This poses as either a choice that implies wrongly that 2 courses of actions are possible. And then false analogies is a comparison that stretches a similarity too far. So evaluating information and reasoning from the web. There's 6 important sections that the book talks about. So accuracy is the first one, and that is to be suspicious of information that hasn't been thoroughly edited. And you should determine whether multiple sources verify the same information. And then it just talks about how you should also just use your general common sense to determine whether the information seems accurate. And then it talks about authority. You should ask what the source is, and then you should determine if you trust the source or if it's a trustworthy site, book. Then the third is audience. Who is the information being offered to? Who is the information meant for? And then there's the purpose, which is why is the information being offered? And then a helpful tip that the book talked about is that you should see what comes after the dot, which so if it's .edu, it's educational. If it's .gov, it's a government website. So that can help you figure out the purpose. And then it talks about recency, how current is the site and how recently was it updated. And then it also talks about coverage. Is the topic covered in enough depth? And does it use a variety of sources? Understanding what can go wrong during decision making. This talks about how groups can make better decisions than individuals if they reach their potential. So the main categories that the book focuses on is hidden profiles, group polarization, and groupthink. So hidden profiles occurs when members collectively hold the information they need to make the best decision. And it talks about when members are each willing to share what they know separately, better decisions are made. Group polarization, members often make decisions that are more extreme than the individual members' initial preferences. So groups push themselves further in a particular direction than when they started. And groupthink, a highly cohesive group wants to maintain consensus so much that confrontation and disagreement is suppressed. This basically means that everyone just wants to get along and they're not going with what they think is best, so the decisions are not carefully thought through. And that's chapter 9. Thank you.